Why do you think that your dog has separation anxiety? Because your neighbor said so? I mean, they might be right, but there are other reasons for your dog barking or destroying the house when you're not there. Not everything is separation anxiety. Let me tell you a quick story. It's really short, I promise. A few years ago, one of my neighbors came to me and said, your dog has separation anxiety. And I'm like, really? So yes, every time that you leave the house, he starts barking like crazy and goes on and on and on. The thing is that every time that I came back home, he was completely asleep. Also, there was no house soiling, no pee, no poop in the house. He didn't destroy anything. It didn't seem like he was drooling. So I did what everyone should do if they think that their dog has separation anxiety. And that is to leave a camera on the entire time that they're gone. And do you know what I saw? I saw a dog sleeping. He was sleeping the entire time that we were gone. Well, he wasn't. But this is the one. He was sleeping the entire time. Well, he was barking for like 5-10 minutes and then he went to sleep. You can either use a camera that has those notifications that tells you every time that your dog is barking, but you can even use your laptop, computer, or anything like that, an old cell phone or something. Just leave it there, usually next to the door or next to the window when dogs with separation anxiety will go to, and just record, let's say, 2-3 hours of you away from the house. Now, your dog might be barking when you're just leaving the house, and he might be barking for 5, 10, even 15 minutes. But that doesn't say that he has separation anxiety. So you need to review the video and see what he actually does after you leave. Of course, if the dog barks that entire time, then it's a good indicator of separation anxiety. If the dog is house soiling and destroying things only when you're gone and like around the door and stuff like that, that might also be a sign. Again, not necessarily, but that can also be a sign. But if your dog barks for like 5-10 minutes and then goes to sleep, but he actually goes to sleep, not sitting next to the door and staring at it for the entire time, because that can actually support separation anxiety. But if the dog is completely asleep, then he might not have separation anxiety and he might be fine. He doesn't want you to leave, but that doesn't mean he has separation anxiety. Other indicators that might say if your dog have or doesn't have separation anxiety is if he can eat when you're alone. So sleeping is a good indicator of not having separation anxiety. Eating is also an indicator. And even his behavior when you come back. Meaning, if you come back and your dog is not going crazy, then maybe the dog doesn't have separation anxiety. Again, it's not the same for every single dog, and some dogs might kind of ignore you when you're there, but will freak out when you're not there. So you really need to see what they do when they're alone. If you're not sure, that's why there are veterinary behaviorists, and of course qualified dog trainers. Now, I said that there are other things that might cause a dog to bark or to house soil or to destroy when the owners are not there. Other things that are not separation anxiety. One of those things can be boredom. Your dog just doesn't like being home alone. He gets bored, so he starts destroying things. We see it more with puppies or young dogs, but it can happen with every single dog, especially if it's a very kind of like active dog, a happy dog that likes playing all the time. House soiling can be an indication of when your dog was last taken on a walk. It can also say something about your dog's health, right? I mean, some dogs might have medical issues that will contribute to not being able to hold it in for the entire time that you're gone. And that actually brings me to another point. There's a difference between a dog that urinates the second that you leave the house to a dog that will keep it in for several hours before he needs to go. Another reason for excessive barking and maybe even distraction is a dog that hears something outside of the house. Those sounds or maybe even scents that he's sensing from the outside might arouse him, might trigger him, and he is either happy or even frustrated, and he doesn't know what to do, and this is the way that he responds. I've seen many videos by professionals saying, yes, go ahead and use a crate for your dog, or go ahead and completely ignore your dog when you leave or when you come back. While it might rarely work with some dogs, it actually doesn't really have a big scientific support. Keeping your dog in a crate if your dog has separation anxiety can actually make things a lot worse. Also, there are studies that show that many dogs that have separation anxiety also have confinement anxiety or confinement stress. They don't want to be confined, so you put them in a crate when they're alone, you're actually making things a lot worse. As for ignoring your dog when you're leaving or when you're coming back, there are actually studies that show that it doesn't have any effect. It's not the reason for your dog to have separation anxiety or not to have it. It might sometimes contribute if your dog has like high energy levels and is hyper attached to you, and then you probably want to work on independence training. But it's not a rule. It's not that if you could always ignore your dog when you leave the house and always ignore the dog when you come back home, it's going to make everything completely disappear. And again, it was tested. It's not something that I'm making up. I do tend not to get too emotional, not to also go crazy and arouse the dog too much when I'm leaving or when I'm coming back. But that by itself is not necessarily the cause for the separation anxiety. If you want to know if your dog actually has separation anxiety, please write me a comment down below and I will try to make a video like that soon. In the meanwhile, why not watch this video?